So this video is a very loose topic, I guess. It has a very loose topic. What I was going to talk about was art in Peru. I can't really narrow it down more than that because I was going in so many different directions. So I'll try to make it cohesive, but at least I warned you at the beginning of the video that it is not cohesive. So basically, in Lima, you have, first of all, I should preface by I'm such a museum rat. I love museums. I love museums, especially art museums. I live for art museums. The first thing I'll do if I have a substantial amount of time in a big city is go to an art museum or go to an art gallery or go to an art exhibition. I love those things. I feel like the art of a place tells you so much about what the people find important, what the people find cutting edge, what the people find daring, what the people choose to depict about their own culture. I love art. I think I love art because it's so deliberate. Like, you know what you're doing when you decide to paint something. There's a reason you decide to paint it, or sculpt it, or mold it, or draw it, or whatever you did with it, and there's a reasoning to every single thing you do during that procedure, and there's a reasoning to how you want it to be exhibited. Like, everything is so deliberate, so for someone to take that much time doing something deliberate, it's like, I want to know, like, what did the artist want this to communicate? How did they communicate it? Everything is, there's answers for all of this. There's not answers for, like, what are you supposed to take away from the work, because everyone has their own individual takeaway. But for so many things about art, there's answers, and I love that so much. So anyway, so Lima actually has some cool art museums. Like, I really did enjoy the art museums in Lima. They also have a lot of colonial art, which was fun to see. And I say this because it was my first experience with colonial art in Latin America. We didn't go to a museum in Costa Rica. I went to museums in Argentina, but they were mostly like contemporary art, which is not as fun, which is as fun, but I'll get there. Was mostly contemporary art and art that happened way after colonialism was over. In Uruguay, I don't remember seeing too much colonial art. Um, in Montevideo, no, I think it was like a contemporary art type of thing, and then also a history museum. In Mexico City, I went to that huge museum of anthropology, but that's not art. That's everything. Well, some of it is art. That wasn't really colonial art. Would highly 1,000,000,000,000% recommend the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Is the best museum I've been to in my whole life, hands down. That was the coolest place I've ever. That was the coolest building I've ever been in, hands down. And so in none of the Latin American countries I had traveled to had I ever really seen colonial art, and I was always really itching to see it, especially knowing about the interactions between colonial Spaniards and then the indigenous peoples. I wanted to see what kinds of things the Spanish would choose to depict coming from that interaction. Um, and it did not disappoint. So you have these like religious depictions, first of all, of the Virgin Mary in these huge dresses that are like shaped like this. I guess I could use the word triangle because I know my shapes, right? So they're shaped like triangles. They take up the whole canvas. It's like Mary takes up this whole canvas, and they keep this one basic shape of this huge triangle. I heard from someone that it was an indigenous influence of depicting like deities as if they were mountains, like female deities were depicted as mountains because they had a relationship in Andean culture. And then meanwhile, like rivers were like male deities because the mountain is like fertilized by the river that comes down it. And so how that influenced the art, I haven't confirmed that, but I would definitely believe it. But anyways, so the portraits of Mary were so cool because they were so consistent. And I'm learning something about myself, is that I really like consistency in some areas, something I didn't know until I like until very recently. um they were so consistent. It was like you went to go see a portrait of Mary and you know what to expect. She's going to have this huge triangle skirt on, this huge triangle dress. She's going to take up the whole canvas. If she's wearing a triangle dress, she's taking up the whole canvas because there's no room for anything else. And maybe she's holding the like the baby Jesus, and that's it. But the thing about this consistency is that from portrait to portrait, her dress was different. And let me tell you about her dress would be so intricately painted with like gold flakes and glitter and metallic colors, and just like it's so embroidered. And none of these portraits looked particularly realistic. The artist didn't go to any lengths to make her dress look like fabric. It looked like this big monolithic triangle thing. So it was so interesting how detailed they got when it came to actually drawing the designs onto the dress. And then it makes you think like, well, why wouldn't you want to depict this life like in a lifelike fashion? But you're taking all of this time to painstakingly depict these details in the dress. Like, what are you trying to communicate here by taking Mary out of this realistic realm and then giving her all this elaborate complexity at the same time? It was so cool. And then you also had, and I actually have a picture of Mary in one of the portraits that I saw. Let's see. Google Photos was not working with me earlier. Ah, okay. Maybe perhaps now. I don't know if y'all can see this. This is what I'm talking about. This huge dress that takes up the whole canvas. But then if you zoom in, I wish y'all could see this. Y'all should look it up. Super detailed, like super detailed. And this is not a small canvas either. This is not like the size of my head. This is like a huge canvas. I think this one is from the Museo Prado, or if not, it's from Mali. It's from Mali. And then also another painting that I liked a lot, if the video is loading, is there was this painting of Jesus, and it was, but not of Jesus, wait for it. So it was supposed to depict the Holy Trinity by having by representing what you think is Jesus three times, but it's really the three parts of God all together. And they are like identical replications. If you're familiar with Andy Warhol and screen printing, you would think it was screen printing if you didn't know any better. Identical, like, depictions of Jesus representing the Holy Trinity. How you and the message was like how you can't tell one apart from the other, how they're all equal to each other, how humans can't comprehend it. And I was like, this is so cool, this is so cool, this is so cool. And it was so ornate. And here's the video. Oh, I love it. It looks so crappy on my screen, but that's it. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Of course, you had like pre-Columbian art, which I'm always here for. I don't even feel like I should make a video about that because I just won't ever stop. What I wanted to focus on was colonial art, because I had never seen that before, and the extreme attention to religiousness. There's a word that ends with like a Y that I can't think of. The extreme attention to religiousness, to depicting religious figures in a very regal, noble manner, in a very deliberate manner, in replicating over and over and over the same scenes and the same people, while telling different stories though of this saint who did this and this, and this saint who did this and this, but everything looks the same. The sameness was almost haunting in a way, and I love that. I lived for it. 10 out of 10 would recommend art museums in Lima. I'm trying to think if I have any more. No, I don't, unfortunately. Oh, this is another picture of Mary, actually. And notice in this picture too, baby Jesus is also in this mountain type of shape. And I don't know. It's just so cool to me. I don't know. Here. Oh, these looks like this picture looks so awful right now on my webcam, but it looks so cool in person. You can't even see Mary's face. But you can see the extreme detail in like her gown. And this again is another huge canvas. Yeah, would recommend. If you're into religious art, I really would recommend it. Religious art is just so fascinating to me. How people depict things that they view to be above human, especially saints who are human but like the best of us, or as so it's believed. How are saints depicted in art? How can like an imperfect person depict something that's also imperfect but is striving to perfection, that is like asymptotic to perfection, is so cool to me. Anyway, so aside from me ranting about how much I loved the colonial religious art in Lima, so we actually took a visit to Cusco because we did the Valley of the Inca tour, and so we're in Cusco and we're in Coricancha, which is this ancient Incan temple. It used to be the biggest Incan temple, but when the Spanish came, they destroyed it, as they do. And then they built their cathedral on top, as they did in many parts of Latin America. That was like a thing they did, which I also thought was really interesting. Like, okay, my first experience with this had been reading Wikipedia when I was a kid because I was super into that kind of stuff. But my first experience being somewhere where the Spanish had actually built something on top of something else was in Mexico City, with my friend Hernan. And it actually was the Catedral Metropolitana, which was built on the second part, I believe, of the Templo Mayor. First of all, the church is huge. Like, the church is gigantic. The church is so big and so grandiose, and so we went to the museum of the Templo Mayor, and they were saying how before the Spanish decided to build on top of it and level it, like its peak was actually as tall as the spires of the cathedral in Mexico City. I don't have a picture of the cathedral in Mexico City. I Let's see. I know I have one of the inside, but I don't think I have one of the outside. Mm-mm-mm-mm. The inside, the inside, the inside. No. Okay, well, this is one, but it's nighttime. Let's see if it loads. Oh, these images look awful on my webcam. Look it up because this just looks horrendous. Um, yeah, it was huge, and just the idea of thinking, if you think of architecture as if it's art, like, I know it's very obvious, like, okay, you build something on top of something else, and obviously that's a show of power, but it's one of those things that really impacted me, that you would demolish someone's biggest religious temple. The Templo Mayor was like this huge religious temple in for the Aztecs. It was for the Aztecs what Coricancha was for the Incas, that you would demolish it, even using some of its stones to build your own cathedral, and then forcing natives to attend your mass in this building, underneath which is literally their most important temple, is like, it's the ultimate power move. I don't know why I think I give art so much importance, but like, I just cannot imagine anything more insulting and more degrading than someone doing all of that. Because again, art is so deliberate. It's so deliberate. Like, I don't know. I don't know. The Spaniards, when they did their colonization, they were really like, they were on it. They were on it with the building cathedrals literally on top of someone else's cathedral. I don't even have words to like describe how that made me feel to be inside of it and to be exploring on the inside and be like, wow, this, I can touch domination. Like, I can touch this pew and feel the oppression. This is crazy. So anyways, Mexico detour. Anyway, so we're in Coricancha, which is now the Church of Santo Domingo in Cusco. So we're in it and we're touring the ancient Incan part that the Spaniards so kindly left. And some of our party went to the bathroom. And as I go to the bathroom, I'm reading, not reading, well, yes, reading. There's some portraits of who I assume is Saint Dominic, Santo Domingo. Could be wrong, I can't remember. I didn't take any pictures. Um, and he is undergoing like this vision of God, this vision of Jesus, vision of Mary, one of the three. That's where all the visions come from. He's undergoing this vision and he's having to be restrained, on his table, and like his friars are crying for him, and he's weeping and he's bleeding from like the stomata, and it was just so wild to see. It was so religious and so symbolic and so poignant, and also so something that someone could easily call primitive. So I'm thinking about like when the Spaniards came to Latin America, and they're calling everything the indigenous people do barbaric, primitive, you know, uncivilized, all these awful words, pagan. And I'm thinking of someone, an outsider. I went to Catholic school from 3K until 6th grade, and my family is very, very Christian. My family's real Christian, real Christian. And I'm thinking of what an outsider would say of these pictures of having your saints go through these like visions of God and hallucinating and thrashing, and I'm just like, everything is really relative, you know? Because someone could really look at this and be like, this is crazy, this is uncivilized, this is primitive, this is barbaric. What do you mean someone is talking to voices and seeing celestial beings? But that's what the conquistadors like believed, and that's what many people still believe to this day. And I don't think anything is necessarily wrong with that belief. But like, it's just so interesting how we cherry pick what we want to call primitive and what we want to call uncivilized in other people's cultures and other people's religions. Me coming from my Catholic school background is familiarized to this image, but say like, I'm trying to think of someone, perhaps my great great grandparents who were animalistic worshippers in the jungle of Nigeria, seeing something like that and being like, wow, these people are crazy. Then these people are saying to them, wow, y'all are crazy. And it's like, why do we do this to each other? Why is our view so narrow? Like, what is the difference between this saint having a mental break? Like, what is the difference between this saint having a like a conversation with God in their head, or having, you know, God appear to them in a vision, or the Virgin Mary appears to them in a vision? What is the difference between that and then this Native American over here using a hallucinogenic drug because he's a shaman to communicate with spirits? Where does the Who gets to pick which one of those is the weirder? You know, like, I can't talk from my own cultural opinion. Who gets to pick there? What's really going on here? You can't pick. You can't just apply these labels. And so it really made me think about judgment and how we're so quick to notice that someone is doing something crazy over here, and then we will never notice the stuff that is questionable or the stuff that would raise eyebrows from another culture about our own culture. And of course, study abroad has only made me think about this more. I remember in other moments, not from Peru, and a bit of a side note, I was in Argentina and I was texting one of my friends, African street seller, and I responded like, yeah, sounds great, like question mark. I mean, not question mark, exclamation mark. Yeah, sounds great, exclamation mark. That's really cool, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And he was like, why are you always doing exclamation marks and like emojis? Are you angry? And I was like, what do you mean am I angry? He was like, why are Americans always so expressive when they text? And I was like, I'm thinking over here that you're robotic because you don't use punctuation. Everything is, you know, like one case of letter, and there's no emojis and there's no smiley faces, and your texts are freaking me out. Meanwhile, my texts, which I think are normal, are freaking you out. So it's just one of those things that really makes you think. And seeing those depictions of the saint going through that vision he was having with God in this temple, in this church that was built on top of an ancient Incan temple because the Incans were uncivilized and primitive for engaging in some of what I imagine were the same religious practices. I was like, this is poignant. This is it. This is great. And so I don't think it was the same church, but no, it was not the same church. So in another church in Cusco, we actually I ran into something else that made me really like that really jolted me. The first thing that really jolted me about art in Peru before I saw this saint in the church of Santo Domingo was this huge portrait in which the Spanish artists had painted themselves into the Incan royal family. Like they had the whole line of Incan emperors, and then at the end it started to be like Spanish kings. And I was like, this is so deliberate, this is so bold, this is so daunting. Obviously I thought it was awful, but at the same time it's like, well, this is another just power move. Art is just so powerful to me. Anyways, I was like, wow, you really just painted yourself into the Incan royal family as if you didn't just decimate the population, right? Anyway, so finally, So we're in this other church, and our guide is explaining to us all the art that you see on the walls. There was a portrait of Jesus at the Last Supper eating cuy, which is guinea pig, and like that made my entire life. That's the best thing I've ever seen. And I'm very into categories. Best things I've ever seen, best countries I've ever been, best food I've ever had. You can ask me anything, and like I will have a category for it. That was the best thing I've ever seen. And but then we come to this statue of a saint on top of a horse, and underneath the horse are indigenous peoples being trampled by the horse and like bleeding and dismembered. And I was like, huh, okay, what's this? So apparently there was a saint in Spain during the time of like the Spanish conquest with the Muslims and everything going on, the La Reconquista, if you're talking in Spanish, Reconquista. Um, so there's this saint who is very revered called Santiago Mata Morros, which is Santiago the Muslim killer. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's believed that in battle, he actually helped the Spaniards win against the Muslims in Spain. And he was said to have appeared during like famous battles, to have like encouraged the troops, and to be sent from God as like a support for the troops. And so many soldiers reported seeing visions of Santiago when they went to war against the Moors. And I was like, okay. So when the conquistadors came, ooh, that was the most American accent ever. When the conquistadors came, they adapted that saint and made a version called Santiago Mata Indios, which is Santiago, the Indian killer. And he was said to have appeared at important like conquest wars against indigenous peoples in the Americas. So there's this huge statue of this man on this horse with literal indigenous people underneath this horse who he's trampling. And I'm like, okay. And this is in a cathedral that was built to force indigenous people into Christianity. And people still go to this day. And the majority of the people who live in Cusco are indigenous. And I was like, oh, Lord Jesus Christ. That really just made me like, my mind was just blown in 50 billion directions when I saw that statue. I didn't know people could do things like that. I was speechless. And the fact that it's still in this church, and that there's actually like other sculptures of this man and other sculptures, like other paintings of this man, of Santiago trampling indigenous peoples, and they're still in cathedrals to this day across Latin America. I mean, I don't know how I feel, except I do know how I feel, but I promised myself I would not curse in case dignitaries view my vlogs. So I won't. But like, thanks Study Abroad for that experience. Thanks to my donor for letting me have this, for letting me see how people use art to oppress other people. I hadn't thought of that yet, but I thought about it in Peru, and that was my first experience with it. And honestly, it made me love art even more for its expressiveness. It gave me a broader view of what art can do. I know lots of people think art is just like painting your little sun and your star or whatever, your tree and your family, and putting it on your fridge when you're 5, and that's the end of it. But that is not the end of it. Art can be super, super, super powerful. And seeing that sculpture, knowing that people still go to pray in those churches, people whose ancestors were forcefully, you know, made Christian, still go to pray in these churches in the shadow of this statue. Okay, it's whatever. Sculpture, I mean, it's not a statue. That was shaking. That was really shaking. That was really jarring. So yeah, that's basically it for this video. My little rant about colonial art in Lima, which I love colonial art so much. If you're in Lima, hit me up. I'll recommend some museums to you. It's really cool. And I'm sure these exist in Mexico City. I'm like 1000% sure they exist in Mexico City, but that didn't get to see all of that when I was there. So yeah, that's it. And next time you're about to point out something weird or bizarre or startling in someone else's culture, really think about what you're doing in your own culture. I remember when I was in Mexico City, and we went to the Templo Mayor Museum, and they were talking about how there used to be skulls of the other indigenous groups around the Aztecs, which they'd hang on the huge gates to their city to warn people what would happen if if they tried them. And I was like, man, that's cruel. That to me also seems like art. That's really cruel to have, you know, your enemies' skulls hung up, and how the Spanish came and thought it was barbaric. Meanwhile, you make sculptures of a saint who's literally named Indian killer, trampling indigenous peoples, and you literally paint yourself into the Incan royal family. Meanwhile, you quarter people. It's like, meanwhile, you rape them women. So it's like, okay, like, I'm not supporting human sacrifice, but also, like, what were y'all doing, Spaniards? ¿Qué pasó? So yeah, that was what I took away. I'm just rambling at this point, so I'll end now. And I think this is almost the end of the Peruvian series. I think I have one more video I want to refilm. So have a good day.